much of my work is about repetition, or I should say it's about the impulse to repeat the same small gestures over and over again and watch them morph, watch them change. Because as often as I repeat, I recognize that there are detours and there are deviances. I might even say that the landscape of repetition resists such an act. And so I'm enthralled by the fact that there are these little instances of trembling, these little instances of wavering in an otherwise identical landscape. I love to think about repetition because I find it is the very impossibility of it that drives me further into investigating how small changes and small differences, because it is about difference and it is about the beauty of difference, that much of my work extols and much of my work tries to embody. These two works are composed of letters of the alphabet tumbling in space, just randomly, just random tumbling in space. And I think of Italo Calvino, the Italian writer, and in his lectures that he gave at Harvard, he talked about 26 letters, the 26 letters of the alphabet, and how those mere 26 letters comprise our texts, our histories, our stories, what we hand down over generations, our communication, our hopes, our dreams, composed of these languages we invent out of 26 letters. And I love that. And so these are like, I think of an avalanche of letters, just the entire falling down of letters from which we pluck and take and compose small bits, large bits, enormous thoughts, small thoughts, mostly fragments. But we've invented this language, and it's magnificent. And these are the symbols from which we make meaning. That's what it is. We make meaning that way. These are waves of thought. And from a distance, you can't tell that these are fragments of thought. But like a lot of my work, when you come in closer, you see something very different. And they're basically fragments of thought that ebb and flow and dissolve into each other and wash over us. And I'm kind of enthralled, as I am in other works that involve text, with the idea of the fragment, that these are small kernels of thought, just pieces, and they dissolve into each other. And I can't decipher them, but I generated that text, and it's it goes on and on and on, and in that sense, that kind of endlessness, which I love, is a form of repetition. So this piece is the result of several years. It's like a map, again, of my fragments of thought, little tiny morsels of philosophical investigation. They never finish because our thoughts never finish, but they have little symbols and little geometries and arrows and stars and sometimes eyes that point to the next movement because it's always moving. And they move into the next fragment, and sometimes there's a revelation and I'll repeat it because I kind of am amazed by what came up. And in other times, they just keep moving into each other. The thoughts move, the ideas move, they form, and they form this kind of map. It took a few years to make it. When I go and I look at what I wrote, I'm often amazed. But that's what it is, a landscape of morsels of thought. I entitled these three works biologies. I'm not sure why I did that, why I call them biologies, other than the fact that they feel like cells or corpuscular little round pieces that keep growing as if they are an organic part of us. Of course, as always, there are small deviances and changes. As always, there are detours. Also, as always, I want to give the sense, I hope I can give the sense of the fact that it keeps going. It's endless. It never stops. And that's what our biologies seem to do. They keep going. So these works are part of a large ongoing project that I am doing at Columbia University in New York City in philosophy seminars. And I basically take my notes in the form of drawings. And in these particular, each class I bring in one page. I take my notes, and in these drawings, I just kept taking my notes on top of what I had already written in a single class. They all take place in one class period, which is about, I guess, 2 hours time, sometimes 3. And so what happens is the actual text is there, but it cannot be deciphered. It becomes very abstract. And in that way, it seems to mirror, often seems to mirror, the very philosophical investigations that are being discussed in the class. That is, they become very abstract. There's something very tangible about them, and there's something very abstract about them. And it also invokes my interest in the link between writing and drawing. Because writing and drawing, for me, they overlap. They're very similar acts. The line that draws and the line that writes is the same line. It's just that one creates meaning and one may not, maybe creating something like this. So these drawings I entitle Vibrations. And they are done with the accompaniment of music. I often work to the accompaniment of music. Specifically here, Beethoven string quartets, and in the case of the orange one, a Schubert string quintet, the Schubert string quintet. And it's partially that I know these pieces really well from listening to them so often, and then I get kind of mesmerized. And this flow, this kind of ebb and flow of vibrations conjures up for me that we are always, sound is always, life is always becoming something other. It is what it is, but then it becomes something other. And it keeps going, and it keeps going, and it keeps going. And music is a great embodiment of that. And music is a great embodiment of the struggle to repeat as well. Certainly modern music is. And these are vibrating for me. They're trembling, they're wavering. And that too feels like the human condition. I mean, if you think about contemporary philosophers, not contemporary, but say philosophers from the 20th century who wrote about Deleuze and Foucault and Jean-Luc Nancy, who wrote about the idea that everything is always wavering, everything is always trembling, and everything is always moving into something other. And I love that idea. And that's also the idea behind repetition. It's always moving away from being repeated. And that's what these are. These are entitled intensities, and the hand keeps moving in circles and creates density and intensity of various degrees. And it's that layering, that on and on and on and on of layering that creates the dark and darker still moments. And then there are these little breaches, these little openings that you could, to me are, well, they are very symbolic in some ways, that there are always these openings, even in the densest parts. It is, again, in a way, calligraphic. That is, it's the same hand that writes that is doing this. So the writing and the drawing hand they share a lot.